The microphone slipped from Steve Harvey's hand, hitting the polished studio floor with a metallic crash that echoed through the Family Feud set like a gunshot. For 40 years of television, Steve had never dropped anything during a taping. Not his cards, not his composure, and certainly not his microphone. But in that moment, surrounded by the bright lights and cameras of America's favorite game show, he wasn't thinking about television anymore. He was looking at an 85-year-old grandmother who had just revealed a secret that would shatter every heart in that studio. Rosa Martinez sat in the front row of the audience, her weathered hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing the same navy blue dress she had worn to church every Sunday for the past 20 years. Beside her, 16-year-old Miguel fidgeted with nervous energy, his Harvard acceptance letter folded carefully in his back pocket. They had driven 18 hours from a small town in New Mexico to be here, in this moment that was supposed to change their lives forever. But what nobody in that studio knew, what Miguel himself didn't know, was that Rosa had already changed everything. She had made a choice that would define not just this episode, but the very meaning of love itself. The day had started like any other Family Feud taping. Steve Harvey strode onto the set in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his smile as bright as the studio lights that illuminated the familiar blue and gold set. The energy was electric, the audience was pumped, and two families stood ready to compete for the $20,000 grand prize. The Martinez family from New Mexico faced off against the Johnson family from Tennessee, and everything seemed perfectly normal. Miguel Martinez stood at his family's podium, tall for his 16 years, with intelligent, dark eyes and the kind of quiet confidence that comes from being the first in your family to dream of college. Next to him stood his mother, his uncle, his cousin, and at the end of the line, Rosa Martinez, the family matriarch who had raised Miguel since he was 3 years old when his parents died in a car accident. During the family introductions, Steve had been immediately drawn to Rosa. There was something about the way she carried herself, the dignity in her posture, the warmth in her eyes when she looked at Miguel that spoke of a lifetime of sacrifice and love. "And who do we have here?" Steve had asked, approaching Rosa with his trademark warmth. "I'm Rosa Martinez," she had replied in accented English, her voice soft but strong. "And this is my grandson, Miguel." "Miguel," Steve had said, turning to the teenager. "Tell me about yourself, young man." Miguel's face had lit up with pride. "Well, Mr. Harvey, I just got accepted to Harvard University. I'm going to study medicine and become a doctor." The studio audience had erupted in applause, and Steve's smile had grown even wider. "Harvard! Now that's what I'm talking about. Grandmother, you must be so proud." Rosa had nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "More proud than words can say," she had whispered. What Steve didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Rosa's tears weren't just from pride. They were from a secret that was eating away at her heart. A decision she had made 6 months ago that she had told no one about, not even Miguel. The game progressed normally through the first 3 rounds. The Martinez family played with heart and determination, Miguel proving to be particularly quick with his answers. When Steve asked for things you might find in a teenager's room, Miguel had confidently answered college applications, earning the #1 spot on the board, and a warm laugh from Steve. "This young man's got his priorities straight," Steve had announced to the audience's delight. Rosa had beamed with pride, but those watching closely might have noticed how she kept pressing her hand to her side, how she occasionally winced when she thought no one was looking, how her breathing seemed just a little too careful. It was during the 4th round that everything changed. The category was things that are worth waiting for, and it was Rosa's turn at the podium. She stepped forward slowly, her hand gripping the podium for support in a way that seemed like nerves, but was something much more. "Rosa," Steve announced with enthusiasm, "name something that's worth waiting for." Rosa looked at Miguel, then back at Steve. Her voice, when it came, was strong and clear. Seeing your grandchild graduate from college. The answer hit the board at number 2, and the Martinez family celebrated. But Steve noticed something in Rosa's tone, something in the way she said those words that made him pause. It wasn't just an answer to a survey question. It was a prayer, a desperate hope, a wish whispered into the universe. That's a beautiful answer, Rosa, Steve said, his voice gentler now. You must be so excited to see Miguel at Harvard. Rosa smiled, but Steve caught something in her expression, a flicker of sadness that she quickly tried to hide. More excited than you know, she said quietly. The game continued, but Steve found himself watching Rosa more carefully. The way she moved, the careful way she breathed, the protective way she held her side when she thought no one was looking. Something was wrong, and Steve Harvey, who had spent decades reading people, could sense it. The Martinez family made it to fast money, with Miguel and Rosa chosen as the 2 players. Miguel went first, scoring a solid 64 points. Rosa needed just 36 more points to win the $20,000, money that would help pay for Miguel's first year at Harvard. As Rosa approached the podium for her turn, Steve noticed her step was even more careful than before. She gripped the podium tightly, and for just a moment, her composure cracked. Steve saw pain flash across her face before she quickly composed herself. Rosa, Steve said, his voice carrying a new note of concern. You feeling okay? Rosa straightened her shoulders and managed a smile. I'm fine, Mr. Harvey. Let's win this for Miguel. The first 4 questions went smoothly. Rosa's answers were thoughtful and scored well. But as Steve prepared to ask the 5th and final question, Rosa swayed slightly. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Steve saw it. Name something, Steve began, then stopped. He looked at Rosa more carefully, noticing the pallor in her face, the way she was gripping the podium. Rosa, are you sure you're okay? And that's when Rosa Martinez did something that no contestant in Family Feud history had ever done. She looked directly at Steve Harvey, and with tears streaming down her face, she told the truth. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm not okay. I'm dying. The studio fell silent. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Steve's smile faded completely, and he stepped closer to Rosa, his host persona falling away to reveal the man underneath. What did you say? Steve asked gently. Rosa took a shaky breath. I have cancer, she said, her voice growing stronger. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors said I have maybe 3 months. The audience gasped audibly. Miguel, standing at his podium, looked confused and terrified. Abuela? He called out, using the Spanish word for grandmother. But Rosa held up her hand, stopping him. She looked directly at Steve, and what she said next would stop the show, break protocol, and change everyone in that studio forever. Miguel doesn't know, she continued, tears flowing freely now. I haven't told him because I used all my treatment money for his college fund. Every penny I had saved for chemotherapy, I gave to Harvard for his first year. I chose his future over my treatment, and I would make that choice again, every single day. Steve Harvey dropped his cards right there on the studio floor. The carefully constructed world of television collapsed in that moment, replaced by something raw and real and heartbreaking. Miguel's face went white with shock and horror. Abuela, no, Miguel whispered, abandoning his podium and rushing to Rosa's side. No, no, no. You didn't. Tell me you didn't. But Rosa cupped Miguel's face in her weathered hands and smiled through her tears. Mijo, you are going to be a doctor. You are going to save lives. My life is almost over, but yours is just beginning. This is what love looks like. Steve Harvey stood frozen for a moment. processing what he had just heard. This wasn't a game show anymore. This wasn't entertainment. This was a grandmother who had literally given her life for her grandson's future, and she had come here to watch him win money that couldn't save her but could help save others through his medical career. What happened next broke every television rule ever written. Steve Harvey walked away from his mark, moved past the podiums, and knelt down in front of Rosa Martinez, right there on the Family Feud stage, in his expensive suit, in front of millions of viewers. Steve Harvey got on his knees. "Mrs. Martinez," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "what you just told me, that's not just love. That's the definition of love. But I need you to listen to me very carefully." The cameras kept rolling, but everyone in the studio knew they were witnessing something beyond television. Steve reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. "I'm going to make some calls," Steve said, his voice firm with determination. "Right now, on this stage. Because what you did for Miguel, that's beautiful. But what we're going to do for you, that's going to be a miracle." Steve stood up and addressed the audience directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do something that's never been done in the history of this show. We're going to pause this game and we're going to save a life." The studio erupted in spontaneous applause, but Steve raised his hand for silence. He was already dialing a number on his phone. "Dr. Richardson," Steve said into his phone, his voice carrying clearly through his wireless microphone. "This is Steve Harvey. I need a favor, and I need it right now. I have a woman here who needs the best oncologist in the country, and money is no object. Can you help me?" The conversation that followed was brief but intense. Steve arranged for Rosa to be seen by the top cancer specialists at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. He arranged for transportation, for treatment, for everything. But he wasn't done. Steve called his foundation director next. "Janet, I need you to set up an emergency scholarship fund. Full ride, 4 years, medical school included." "Yes, right now. I'll explain later." Miguel stood beside his grandmother, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by what was happening. Rosa squeezed his hand, her own tears mixing with gratitude and disbelief. When Steve finished his calls, he approached Rosa and Miguel again. This time, he spoke to both of them. "Rosa, you're going to get the best treatment available. And Miguel, you're going to Harvard and medical school. And you're going to become the doctor your grandmother always knew you could be. And she's going to be there to see you graduate." Steve then did something unprecedented. He removed his suit jacket, the same jacket he wore for every taping, and placed it gently around Rosa's shoulders. "This jacket has been with me for every show I've ever hosted," Steve said. "It's seen families win and lose, laugh and cry. But today, it's going home with someone who taught me what real winning looks like." The audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, but the moment wasn't. Steve turned to the Johnson family, who had been watching this unfold with tears in their own eyes. "Johnson family, I need to ask you something. Would you be okay if we called this game a tie? Both families win today?" The Johnson family patriarch didn't hesitate. "Steve, after what we just witnessed, we'd be honored to share this win." Both families came together in the center of the stage, surrounding Rosa and Miguel. What followed wasn't just a celebration of a game show victory. It was a celebration of love, of sacrifice, of the human spirit at its finest. The episode aired 6 weeks later, exactly as it happened. The response was unprecedented. Donations poured in from around the world, not just for Rosa's treatment, but for other families facing similar choices between health care and their children's futures. Rosa's treatment at MD Anderson was successful beyond all expectations. The combination of cutting-edge treatment and what her doctors called the strongest will to live they'd ever seen proved to be powerful medicine. The cancer went into remission. Miguel started at Harvard that fall, but not before spending the summer as his grandmother's caretaker and biggest cheerleader during her treatment. He called Steve Harvey every week with updates, and Steve answered every single call. The suit jacket Steve gave Rosa became a symbol of hope for families facing impossible choices. Rosa wore it to Miguel's Harvard graduation 4 years later, then to his medical school graduation, and finally to the ceremony where Dr. Miguel Martinez opened his own practice specializing in treating underserved communities. Steve Harvey changed his approach to hosting after that day. He began every taping with a reminder to his crew and contestants that they were dealing with real families, real dreams, and real struggles. The show became known not just for laughs, but for moments of genuine human connection. Years later, when interviewers asked Steve about that episode, he would say, "Rosa Martinez taught me that the greatest prize anyone can win is the chance to love someone so much that their dreams become more important than your own life." That's not just family values, that's the definition of love itself. Rosa Martinez lived to see Miguel become chief resident at the hospital where she was first treated. She lived to see him get married, to hold her great-grandchildren, to watch him save countless lives. The 3 months the doctors gave her became 3 years, then 5, then 10. The final scene of their story took place on Rosa's 95th birthday. Miguel, now a successful doctor, stood beside his grandmother's hospital bed, not as a patient this time, but as her grandson visiting on her birthday. She was weak but alert, still wearing Steve's jacket that had become her trademark. "Abuela," Miguel said, holding her hand, "do you ever regret the choice you made?" Rosa smiled and squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "Misho, every life you save makes that choice worth it again. I didn't just save your future, I saved all the futures you'll save." Steve Harvey attended Rosa's 95th birthday party via video call, singing happy birthday from his studio between tapings. When Rosa passed away peacefully 2 years later, Steve spoke at her funeral, calling her the woman who taught America what love in action looks like. The episode remains the highest-rated Family Feud episode in the show's history. Not because of the game, but because of the moment when television became a window into the human heart. When a grandmother's sacrifice became a nation's inspiration. When a game show host became an agent of miracles. Miguel Martinez, now Dr. Martinez, keeps a photo of that day on his desk at the free clinic he opened in his grandmother's honor. In the photo, Rosa wears Steve's jacket, while Miguel holds the Harvard acceptance letter. Both are crying, but both are smiling, surrounded by the golden light of the Family Feud studio. The clinic's motto, inscribed on a plaque by the entrance, reads, "Love in action saves lives." It's a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on television stages, but in the quiet moments when we choose someone else's dreams over our own comfort. Steve Harvey still keeps Rosa's picture in his dressing room. Every day before taping, he looks at it and remembers the lesson she taught him, that the most powerful moments in television happen not when we entertain people, but when we remind them what it means to be human. The promise Rosa made to see Miguel graduate was kept, but more than that, she created a legacy that continues to save lives through her grandson's work, through the foundation established in her name, and through the countless viewers who were inspired to put love into action in their own families. Sometimes, the greatest stories aren't about winning game shows. They're about winning at life, one sacrifice at a time, one choice to love beyond yourself, one moment of truth that changes everything forever.